Okay, we're here with Reverend Tom Wakely, a congressional candidate in Texas's 21st district, running on the Green Party line. Tom, welcome to the program.
I appreciate it, John. I really do. Thank you.
Oh, you're quite welcome. So, Tom, before we get into the entirety of what your campaign really stands for, I think it would be great to kind of get some perspective of what you do, beyond politics. You are a reverend and, you are a Unitarian Universalist. I think I've seen a lot of commonalities with Unitarian Universalism and what we try and preach here as Democratic Universalism. Could you let for the folks out there know a little bit about what Unitarian Universalism is?
Well, frankly, right now, I'm not affiliated with the Unitarians anymore, even though I was a Unitarian pastor. I think it's just I'm a secular humanist. And I think that pretty much sums up who I am, and it fits more in with the Unitarians. But I went to a United Church of Christ seminary, but I started a Unitarian church. And then I subsequently hung out with the Lutherans. So I've been kind of, I don't know, a traveler in terms of the faith community, but always a secular humanist.
So I'd love to ask you, obviously you espouse secular humanism, but I think faith is a very interesting conversation in how it relates to, the political process. Some people will say, like progressives, like most Green Party members are, they don't know how to actually talk to these faith-based communities. Do you think it's important to talk about faith within our political discussions in general?
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. No, it's very, very important. They are the leaders, from Martin Luther King on to before King. The faith community has always been out there. They're in the forefront of this. And that's one reason I went to seminary, is to kind of better understand where the Christian movement was coming from. So even though I say I'm a secular humanist, I mean that's not really true as much as I'm just a traveler. I mean, I find stuff within Christianity, within the Jewish faith. I have a lot of Muslim friends, so I think it's just more of an interfaith man who believes that whether it's God you believe in or the Great Spirit, faith is an extremely important part of everything we do every single day. And I think all of us need to really start reaching out to that faith community because they are our allies.
Yeah, no, I certainly think a lot of people who will actually read the text and see some of the stuff in it would see that there are some of these common values of progressivism within it. And I do agree that, there are going to be bits of pieces of faith of different religions that all have, things that we can agree to, some common truths to it. And so I can understand that perspective of having a variety of opinions there. It kind of gives a independent perspective kind of in politics as well. What would you say is that like core few issues that you're trying to work through within the campaign that really inspired you to run for office? I know this isn't your first time, but what are those core whys for you want to getting involved in political office?
I think it's really just, I mean, everything intersects with one another, intersectionality. But the primary motivating factor for me was climate change. And that goes back to a faith-based perspective. I think all the major faiths, God created the earth. We're here to protect the earth. Native Americans are so much tied into that. And I think that's what kind of motivated me into getting involved, is that we need to do something about climate change. And it's just not happening.
So I'd love to pry a little bit on the climate change point. What are some of those transition plans that you're looking to do? I obviously think there's a lot of different solutions to this because it's a big problem. So there's a lot of options. What are some of the things you'd prioritize to address climate change?
Well, I think the major thing we need to look at is that we're pumping way too much greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and the planet's heating up. And 4 years ago, when I first jumped into running for Congress in Texas 21, climate change was my main focus. And I ran against Lamar Smith. I don't know if you recall that guy. He's 30 some odd year Republican, chair of the House Committee on Science, Space, Technology, and I guess he had the nickname as the commander-in-chief of anti-climate change. He was. So we ran against him on the issue of climate change. And what I pointed out to everybody, unless we did something, this was 4 years ago, unless we did something now, it was only going to get worse. Well, 2 years later, in 2018, I jumped into the Democratic primary for governor to take my message around the state. We got to do something about it. It's no longer climate change, it's now a climate crisis. And this was 2018. And I warned people that if we don't do something now, it's going to get worse. And now it's 2 years later again. And it's no longer a climate crisis, it's a climate emergency. And if people don't pay attention this time, in 2 years, it's going to be a climate catastrophe. And 2 years after that, it's going to be a climate apocalypse. Seriously, it has gotten so bad. I don't know if you know this. We have literally millions and millions of abandoned or orphaned oil and gas wells here in the United States. Some of them dating back to the 1930s. And they're just pumping, well, they're not pumping, they're leaking methane gas into the atmosphere since the 30s. And we need to plug them all. But I don't see that. We need to stop fracking. But I think it's politically not going to happen. It should happen, but it's not going to happen. The hurdles, whether Trump gets reelected or Biden gets elected, it doesn't matter. They both support fracking. So that's going to be an uphill battle to do anything about fracking. But we could do something about plugging those 2.5 million abandoned wells in the United States. But again, politics. The last figure I saw, it's going to cost us $600 billion. $600 billion to plug all of those wells. But it needs to be done. I mean, it just needs to be done. And I think we need to probably set something up like we did with the Superfund sites for chemical exposure, contaminant. We need to set something similar up to plug all these abandoned wells. Fund it, and let's start plugging all those wells. And I'll keep tens of thousands of people busy for many, many years to going out there and plugging 2 million wells.
Yeah. So I hear a couple things here. I think first and foremost, what I'm hearing is that we have to address just the main problem of fossil fuels coming out of the system, and we got to do it sooner than later. But, I want to know, what is that transition plan? Because, I agree that fracking is bad. But I think one of the things that Joe Biden's trying to do in his approach is that he's saying, we're going to freeze any new developments, but we're not going to phase that out until we start grappling with oil and coal. I know that oil, as well as fossil fuels like, natural gas, are big economies in Texas. Could you help people understand what that transition plan is? Because, of course it's going to be necessary, but that's going to take, radical mobilization to actually accomplish. What does that plan look like for the workers who are going to have to leave these jobs in the fossil fuel industry?
Yeah, and I think under Biden's plan, I think he only said no new fracking on federal lands. That's what his position is. But that doesn't mean they're going to stop fracking anywhere else on private lands or with oil companies or gas companies. It's just no new fracking on federal lands. So I think just
to clarify, that point is that in general you can't have fracking on public lands, but the expansion of private fracking enterprises is also frozen. It's just not removing existing fracking implementation that's already trying to get natural gas. I just want to clarify that position.
Okay. So, but anyway, in terms of transition, I think it's not going to be easy, but I think we need to look at, I'm sure these are the same arguments people gave that were making buggy whips and wheels for horse-drawn carriages. We're going to be out of a job. What are we going to do? but we transitioned to the automobile anyway. So I think people need to understand that, yeah, we need to transition out of fossil fuels. You're going to be out of a job. But like I said, everything is intersectional. So maybe that's where universal basic income comes in. All right, guys, you're out of work. We're going to shut down fossil fuels. You're not going to have a job, but we can provide you with enough income until we can find you another job. But I mean, there's all sorts of avenues we can take. But I am afraid, John, that we're going to be we've already crossed the Rubicon.
Yeah.
From every climate scientist I've talked to, they said even if we stop all the fracking in January, stopped it completely throughout the United States, we capped all of those abandoned wells, all we would do is just stop where we're at now. Things aren't going to get better. We're still going to have intensified. Third hurricane this season just hit New Orleans. We're going to have intense storms. We're going to still have water. Things are just going to stop. It's not going to get better. But if we don't stop it, like next year, in 2 years, it's going to be a catastrophe. So I think that we have, and all of this waiting until 2030, 2050 to transition out of fossil fuels is way too long to wait. It's going to have to be a lot quicker. I mean, a whole lot quicker. Like within the next decade, we're going to have to completely move away. And I think that's where, wind power, more solar power. I mean, we have a lot of technology. So, I mean, it's just a matter of the willingness to do that. And that's the question is, do we have the willpower to do it? And there's so much money involved in oil and gas, so much money pouring into political candidates, that I just can't see people wanting to give that up. But we have to think beyond ourselves. And I think the Native American community says when they make a decision, they look out at 7 generations. What decisions do we make are going to affect 7 generations down the road? We don't have that. We kind of think, well, how's it going to affect me next week, let alone my grandchildren, my great-great-great-great-grandchildren. So I think it's probably, and like I said, I think it's going to be forced upon us. I don't think we're going to have a choice. I think the sea levels are going to be rising. New Orleans, like I said, has been hit. Next year is going to get hit again and again and again. As the polar ice caps melt, glaciers melt, sea level, we're going to lose coastal cities. It's going to be forced upon us to transition away from fossil fuels.
Yeah, and I think part of that incentive is the terms that these people in Congress have. When you have a 2-year election cycle and you're constantly running for re-election, you're not thinking towards the future. You're thinking in these 2-year blocks, if that, even these weeks at a time, as you said before. So I think there's some natural incentives for why, they're not thinking of this, in addition to the monetary factors that the fossil fuel companies pump in. I think this is my final question for this first part is, I wanted to understand in your mind, what is that democracy reform plan that you think needs to be done so that the incentives change in Congress so that they want to finally take action on issues like climate change? Because I think, as you said, we got to do it quickly, but it seems like they just are dragging their feet along. What's your plan?
I was just talking today. I don't know if you know, my wife and I run a hospice from our home. So one of the nurses, Beverly, was here today. And so she's finished up with a patient. And we're talking about this same thing. And she mentioned, we've got people in Congress 87 years old that have been there forever and a day. We got octogenarians everywhere in Congress. And that is part of the problem, is that I'm an old guy too, but and I know I'm dealing with old people all the time, and there's absolutely no way I can tell you an 87-year-old person is able. No, we have a major problem with that. And I think there needs to be term limits. That's one way to deal with this age issue. Maybe, for the House, maybe no more. Change the term. Maybe instead of every 2 years, one term, 6 years. That's it. One term, 6 years. You get in, you got 6 years, then you're off back to your day job, whatever it was. Maybe for senators, maybe up to 10 years. One term, that's it. And if we can do something like that, you can get in there, you can work your 6 years as a congressperson, 10 years as a senator, but then you return back into your day job. Because otherwise, I just don't see it. I don't see how it was going to change. I mean, you're younger than me. I guess you look younger. You got your hair.
Yes, I'm very secretly old.
But the thing is that you got to agree, man. This is just ridiculous to have 87-year-old people in there making decisions for your generation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, hey, the Speaker of the House currently, Nancy Pelosi, is around 81. She is now contemplating running again and being the leader of the party again. So, and then you have now our oldest president ever. Doesn't matter who wins this election cycle, barring a third party finally breaking through. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We have this age, restriction. And I think fundamentally it comes down to, in my opinion, and we'll touch on this in the second part, there's a little bit of a distribution of wealth problem too. Older generations tend to have the wealth, and that's how the politicians need to win. So they start appealing to those crowds, and they have more connections over time. So, in our second part, we're going to talk about some economics before we go and, address the elephant in the room, which is, some people feel like they're trapped in this duopoly and should be supporting Democrats and Republicans. You were the former nominee of the Democratic Party. Why should they be going green? So we'll address all those things in our second part of our conversation. So join us real soon. We'll be back with Tom Wakely. Thank you so much for watching today's episode of The Hill of Roses. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, please let us know by subscribing to our channel, liking today's video, and sharing the video with your friends. Also, if you want to be notified, please make sure you hit the bell when you subscribe. Finally, if you want to find more of our network's content, please go to thehillofroses.com. With that being said, we love y'all for helping the movement grow, and we hope you're staying rosy out there.